Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we've got something really special lined up for you. I'm here to walk you through some of the wildest, most dramatic stories that Reddit has to offer. The kind of tales that'll keep your mind racing even as you're trying to wind down for the night. But don't worry, we'll get through this together, and by the end, you'll have had a full emotional journey. Before we dive into tonight's collection, I want to take a moment to thank all of you who've been sticking with the channel. Whether you're here because you're studying for exets, trying to escape a tough day, or just looking for something to listen to while you build your next masterpiece in Minecraft, you're exactly where you need to be. Your comments, your shares, your support genuinely means the world to me. So many of you have told me that these stories help you through difficult times, that they make you less alone. And honestly, that's everything I do this for. Tonight's theme is all about secrets, betrayals, and the moments that change families forever. These aren't just casual tales. These are the stories people hold on to for years. They're the kind of stories you tell your closest friends late at night, the ones that make you quit everything you thought you knew about the people around you. So grab whatever makes you comfortable.
Make a cup of tea, get your blanket, dim the lights, put on some headphones, find yourself somewhere quiet or you can just exist for the next few hours without interruption.
We're going to explore some of the deepest, darkest, and most revealing moments that real people have experienced. Some will shock you, some will break your heart, and some will make you see the people in your own life just a little bit differently. Let's start with our Earth story, and I have to tell you, this done heavy from the jump. It's about family secrets, inherited pressure, and what happens when an id object becomes the symbol of everything wrong with a family dynamic. Story 1, the family heirloom. I still don't know how to talk about this, but I think I need to write it down somewhere. Maybe if I explain it, I'll finally understand what happened. My name doesn't really matter, and neither does where I'm from. What matters is that there's this heirloom, a bracelet actually, that's been in my family for 4 generations. It's not made of gold or diamonds or anything objectively valuable. It's a silver bracelet with that intricate carving that supposedly came from my great-grandmother's trip to India in the 1950s. The story goes that her grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, gave it to her as a blessing, as a symbol of the family's protection and prosperity. My mother received it from her mother on her 18th birthday. She wore it every day of her adult life. Every photograph of her for the past 40 years shows her with that bracelet on her left wrist. It became so much a part of her identity that I don't think I ever really saw her without it. When I turned 18, my mother sat me down and told me that the bracelet was now mine. She took it off her wrist, and I put it on mine. She cried. I cried. It felt like a sacred moment, like I was being passed not just an object, but a responsibility, a legacy, something that connected me to every woman in my family who had come before me. I wore that bracelet constantly for the next 7 years. Through college, through my first job, through a failed engagement, through moving to a new city by month. That bracelet was always there, constant and reassuring. My family had always said that as long as I wore it, I was protected, that whatever happened in my life, I had this connection to my ancestors, this invisible thread that kept me safe. Then my sister got engaged. My sister is 4 years younger than me. We always had a complicated relationship, the typical older sister, younger sister dynamic, with some jealousy, some favoritism from our parents mixed in. But when she got engaged, something shifted in my family. My mother became obsessed with the wedding perfect. It was all-consuming. Every family dinner turned into a conversation about flowers, guest lists, seating arrangements. Our family is pretty traditional, and a wedding is seen as this huge milestone, this moment when a woman is finally moving into her proper place in society, or whatever. About 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother called me into her room and told me that she had a request. She asked me if I would be willing to let my sister borrow the heirloom bracelet for the wedding. Just for the day, she said. She wanted my sister to feel protected and blessed on her wedding day, just like I had. I remember this moment so clearly. I was standing in my mother's doorway, and she was sat on the edge of her bed. And she had this expression on her face like she already knew I was going to say no, like she was bracing herself for disappointment. I said yes. I don't know why. I could have said no. I had every right to say no. It was my bracelet. My mother had given it to me. But I said yes anyway because I saw that desperate hope in my mother's eyes, because I knew how much this wedding meant to her, because I was the good daughter, the one who doesn't make a fuss, the one who always does what's asked of her. My sister was thrilled. She wore the bracelet on her wedding day, and she looked beautiful. She held her husband's hand and promised forever to him, and my mother cried happy tears, and everyone took 1,000 photographs. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that's supposed to be perfect and sacred. I was happy for my sister. It really was. After the wedding, I asked my mother when my sister would bid me the bracelet back. My mother said that my sister would return it after the honeymoon. A week later, the honeymoon was over. I asked again. My mother said that my sister had asked to borrow it a little bit longer, just for a few more weeks, while she settled into married life. I said okay, even though something in my chest felt tight and wrong. Weeks turned into months. Every time I asked for the bracelet, there was a reason why my sister said had it. She was going through something with her new husband. She was worried. She needed the protection more than I did right now. Didn't I understand? My mother kept saying things like, "Sweetheart, your sister is going through a difficult transition, and can't you just let her have this for a little while longer?" But it wasn't a little while. It was 6 months. It was 9 months. It was a year. One day, I went to my sister's house to pick up the bracelet. I had decided I wasn't asking anymore. I was taking it back. I was tired of weight. I was tired of not having this piece of my identity, this connection to my ancestors. When I got to her house, she seemed nervous to see me. She invited me in, offered me coffee, made small talk in a way that felt faint. Finally, I asked for the bracelet. My sister looked at me and she took a breath and she told me something that I still haven't fully processed. She said that about 3 months ago, she had lost the bracelet. She had taken it off at a restaurant to wash her hands, and when she came back to the table, it was gone. Someone had stolen it. She had looked everywhere. She had called the restaurant 100 times. She had hired a private investigator. But the bracelet was gone. She then told me that she had been too terrified to tell me or our mother what had happened. She had been wearing a replica, a copy that she'd had made by a jewelry artist. She had been lying for months. She had been pretending to still have the bracelet while our family thought she was being blessed and protected by it. She had been lying to our mother. She had been lying to me. I stood there in my sister's living room and I felt something inside me crack. Not just anger. I expected anger, but something deeper than that. A betrayal so fundamental that I couldn't quite process it. This woman who I had supported my whole life, who I had given my most precious possession to out of love and obligation, had lied to me. And our mother, when I told her what had happened, when I explained that the bracelet was lost, gone forever, she didn't get angry at my sister, she got angry at me. Our mother blamed me for lending the bracelet in the first place. She said that I had been selfish to give it away, that I should have known better, that I should have been more protective of something so sacred. She said that by allowing my sister to borrow it, I had invited this disaster. I had broken the chain of protection that had kept our family safe for generations. My sister never had to face any real consequences. Our mother bought her a new bracelet, a nicer one actually, to replace the replica she'd been wearing. And the original bracelet, the one with 4 generations of history carved into its silver surface, was just gone, lost to some thief who probably had no idea what they had stolen. Here's the thing that destroyed me the most, though. It wasn't just the loss of the bracelet itself. It was what it represented about my family. I realized that the bracelet had never actually protected anyone. It was just an object. The real protection in families comes from honesty, from trust, from people telling you the truth even when it's hard. And my family had failed at that. My sister had lied. My mother had allowed that lie to continue. And they both blamed me when it all fell apart. I moved out 6 months later. I haven't worn jewelry since. I don't talk to my sister very much anymore. We're cordial at family ends, but there's this distance said that I don't think it'd ever fully go away. And my mother, she's never quite forgiven me for losing the bracelet, even though I didn't lose it. My sister did. But somehow, in my family's narrative, it became my fault. It became the moment when I failed to live up to my responsibility as the keeper of our family legacy. Sometimes I wonder if my sister still thinks about that bracelet. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets lying, or if she's moved on and doesn't think about it anymore. But I think about it all the time, because that bracelet wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was supposed to be proof that we were a family that mattered, that we were protected, that we had something worth passing down. And when it was lost, it felt like proof of something else entirely, that we were a family built on secrets and lies and unspoken resentments. The bracelet is gone. But what it destroyed is still here. That stow is over. And I want to sit with that for a moment because it's heavy. It's about so much more than a bracelet, isn't it? It's about family expectations, about the thing we inherit, not just physically but emotionally, about how one lie can unravel everything. The bracelet represented protection, but in the end, what the family really needed was honesty, and they couldn't give that to each other. Speaking of lies that unravel families, our next story is about a man who discovered that his entire childhood wasn't what he thought it was, and the person who lied to him was the person he trusted most. Story 2. The adoption nobody knew. I was 23 years old when my world fell apart. I had always had a pretty good life. Both my parents were alive and healthy. I had siblings. We had a nice house in the suburbs. My dad was an accountant. My mom was a teacher. Everything seemed stable and normal, and exactly like what a safe childhood was supposed to look like. Then my grandfather had a stroke. My dad's father, this man I'd known my entire life, collapsed one afternoon while he was out gardening. He ended up in the hospital in critical condition, and our whole family rushed there. My dad was devastated. This was his father, the person he admired, the person he went to for advice and guidance. Grandpa survived the stroke, but he was different after. His speech was slurred. His memory was spotty. He had good days and bad days. During one of his good days, a few weeks into his recovery, he was set in his hospital room, and I was with him with my parents. He looked at my dad, and he said something that nobody was expecting. He said, I need to tell you something before I forget again. Your mother always wanted me to tell you, and I think now is the time. My dad went pale. My mom looked confused. My grandfather took a breath, and he said, "You're adopted, son. Your mother and I couldn't have biological children. When you were a baby, we adopted you. And then, 3 years later, we got pregnant with your sister naturally. But you were wanted just as much as she was. You were loved just as much as she was." The room was completely silent. My dad didn't say anything for a long time. Then he stood up and walked out of the room. My mom followed him. I sat with my grandfather, and he seemed confused, like he wasn't sure if he'd just done something wrong or something right. He looked at me and asked if I understood what he had just said, and I told him I wasn't sure. My parents fought that night. I could hear them through the walls of our house. My mom was crying. My dad was angry. He was saying things like, "How could you not tell me? And my entire life has been a lie. And did everyone know except me?" The next day, my mom sat me down and my siblings down and explained what had happened. My grandfather had disclosed a family secret that my dad had never known. My dad was adopted. He'd spent 45 years of his life thinking he was biologically connected to his parents, thinking he had inherited his father's stubbornness and his mother's creativity and his grandparents' brown eyes, and it was all not caught a lie, but not entirely the truth either. My dad was furious at both of his parents. He felt betrayed. He felt like his identity was built on a foundation that wasn't real. Even though he logically understood that being adopted didn't change who he was, emotionally, he was devastated. It was like someone had told him that his entire life was a toe that wasn't true, and now he had to rewrite his whole sense of self. But here's where it gets complicated. My dad's anger started to redirect itself. He became angry at my grandfather for telling him. He became angry at my grandmother, his adoptive mother, his real mother, in every way that mattered for keeping this secret for so long. And then he became angry at us, at me, at my siblings. He started saying things like, "I don't even know who I am anymore. And how do I know that you're really my biological children? How do I know that you are actually related to me?" He knew, logically, that we were his children. But in his emotional state, he was questioning everything. He was doubting the reality of his own relationships. He demanded a DNA test. He made my mom and all of us get DNA tests just to confirm that we were actually his children. I was 17 at the time, and I remember feeling this deep shame about it, like my father didn't trust me, didn't believe that I was his. It was incredibly painful. The tests came back confirming that we were, in fact, his biological children. But instead of being reassuring, it just made things worse. Because now my dad was grappling with this idea that he wasn't really a real member of his family in the way that we were. He had these dark thoughts about belonging and genetics and what made a family real. Over the next couple of years, my dad went through a lot of therapy. He came to terms with the fact that being adopted doesn't make you less of a real family member. He understood that his parents loved him, that they always did, and that their decision to keep this secret wasn't malicious. It was something they thought they were protecting him, but the damage was done. My dad's relationship with his parents became draining. My dad's relationship with himself changed. And honestly, my dad's relationship with us, with his children, took time to heal. We had to reestablish trust. We had to prove to him that he mattered, that he was part of our family, that his fears were understandable but weren't rooted in reality. What I learned from this whole experience is that family secrets have a lifespan. They can't stay hidden forever. And when they come out, they create this avalanche of emotional chaos. My dad spent 45 years not knowing something fundamental about himself, and when he found out, it sent him spiraling. But he starved it. Our family starved it. And in some ways, we became stronger because of it. My dad's now in a place where he can talk about his adoption with some peace. He's reconnected with his parents. He's realized that the people who raise you, who love you, who show up for you, those are your real family, not genetics. And he's learned to extend that same compassion to himself that he's always been able to extend to us. It's still a toe that feels raw when I tell it, but it's also a toe about survival and about families being able to come back together even after they've been broken apart. That toe is over. What strikes me about that one is how much weight we put on identity and genetics. But really, what matters is love and honesty. A family is built on the people who choose to be thee, not on biology. And sometimes the secrets we keep in the name of protection end up causing more damage than the truth ever would have. Now let's shift gears a little bit. Our next story is about a woman who discovered a side of her family that she never knew existed. and it came with photos, documents, and years of lies hidden in a basement. Story 3, Grandma's Basement Secret. I grew up in a very normal, very boring household. My grandmother lived with us for most of my childhood. She was quiet, kind, and spent most of her time doing needlework, tending to her garden, or read mystery novels. She was the kind of grandmother who baked cookies and asked about your day and gave good advice. Everyone in our extended family agreed that Grandma was basically a saint. She was the moral compass of our family, the person we all looked up to. When I was 21, my grandmother passed away suddenly from a heart attack. We were all heartbroken, obviously. She had been such a consistent, loving presence in all of our lives. My parents decided that I should help clean out her room and her belongings, sort through her thing, and decide what to keep and what to donate. I went through her closet, I went through her drawers, I found old letters and photographs, and then I noticed a door in the corner of her room that I had never really paid attention to before. It led to the basement, my grandmother's basement. I had never been down there. None of us kids were ever allowed down there. My grandmother always said it was just storage, just old junk, nothing interesting. So I opened the door and went down the stairs. The basement was cool and smelled like dust. There were boxes and boxes and boxes of things, carefully organized and labeled. I started opening them, and I found photographs, hundreds of photographs. Some were family photos I'd seen before, pictures from holidays and birthday parties and family vacations. But others were photographs I had never seen before. They showed my grandmother as a young woman, dressed in beautiful clothes from the 1940s and 1950s, at parties and restaurants and on what looked like vacation. She was smiling in every photograph. She looked happy in a way I had never seen her look in my life. And she was with a man, not my grandfather, a different man entirely. I found old ticket stubs from Broadway shows in New York. I found hotel receipts from fancy resorts in Florida and California. I found letters written in my grandmother's handwriting, describing adventures and experiences in a life that was so different from anything I knew about her. And then I found a photograph that changed everything. It was a photograph of my grandmother holding a baby. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s. The back of the photograph had a date written on it, 1954, and there was a name written on the back, my son, James. My grandmother had had a child, a son, a brother or uncle that we didn't know about, and judging by the photographs and documents I found in the boxes, she had put him up for adoption when he was a few months old. There were letters. I found drafts of letters that my grandmother had written to her son, letters that she had written over the decades but apparently never sent, letters that she explained why she had given him up for adoption. She wrote about being young and unmarried and scared and having a baby with a man who didn't want to marry her. She wrote about her parents forcing her to give the baby up, threatening to disown her if she didn't. She wrote about the shame and the guilt and the grief that had never gone away. In one of her letters from the 1900s, she wrote about watching my grandfather's life with him, watching her new husband become a father rod to a child who wasn't biologically his, and wondering what her son was due, whether he was happy, whether he thought about her at all. She wrote about the complexity of loving a child you gave away and trying to be a good wife and mother to the family you ended up with, all while carrying the grief of the family you didn't get to have. There were documents from an adoption agency. There was a name and a last name of the family that had adopted her son. There were update photographs and descriptions of his life at different ages, sent by the adoption agency years ago when open adoptions were becoming more common. My grandmother had kept track of her son's life from a distance. She had known where he was, what he was due, whether he was happy, but she had never reached out. She had never tried to contact him. She had let him live his life without knowing that she was watching, waiting, hoping for some kind of connection that never came. I sat in my grandmother's basement for hours, looking through all of these things, and I cried. I cried because I realized that the woman I had known my whole life had been carrying this enormous secret. She had been a grandmother to me, loving and present and kind, but she had also been a woman who had lost a child, who had spent decades wondering about him, who had never gotten to know him or have him in her life. I confronted my parents about it. I asked them if they knew about my grandmother's son, and my mother told me that yes, they had known. My grandmother had told them years before, had explained the situation, but had made them promise never to tell anyone. She was ashamed. She felt like she had failed as a mother. She couldn't reconcile who she had become, this woman who was devoted to her family, who was seen as kind and moral and good, with the young woman who had given away her baby. My mother said that my grandmother had spent years in therapy trying to come to terms with what she had done. She had never regretted her decision in a practical sense. She knew that adoption had been the right choice for her son, that the family who had raised him could give him more than she could have as a single, unsupported mother in the 1950s. But emotionally, she had never stopped grieving the child she didn't get to raise. I made a decision. I found my grandmother's son. I tracked him down through adoption records and social media. I sent him a message explaining who I was and what I had found, and I asked if he would be interested in knowing about his biological mother. He said yes. We arranged to meet. He was a man in his 70s, kind and intelligent and warm. He told me that he had always known he was adopted, that his adoptive parents had been open about it with him, and that he had always wondered about his biological mother. But he had never searched for her because he respected her privacy. He had assumed that if she had wanted contact, she would have reached out. When I told him about my grandmother, about the letters and the photographs and the decades of grief, he cried. He told me that they wished he had known her. He wished that his mother hadn't felt ashamed. He wished that thing could have been different. But he also said something that I think was very profound. He said that he was grateful to my grandmother, even though he never knew her, because her decision to give him up had given him a life. It had given him a family who loved him, opportunities, a path that had made him happy. My grandmother died, so she and her son never got to have a conversation. They never got to know each other. But I was able to bring them together in a small way by sharing their stories. I gave him copies of the letters she had written to him. I gave him the photographs. I let him know that his biological mother had loved him, had thought about him, had carried him in her heart for her entire life. And I learned something fundamental about my grandmother. She wasn't just the kind, quiet woman who baked cookies. She was also a woman who had experienced real trauma and real loss. She was a woman who had sharped, and she was a woman who in her own way had never stopped loving the son she didn't get to raise. That toad is over. And what it taught me is that everyone is carrying something. Everyone has a toe that's hidden beneath the surface, a toe that makes them more complicated and more human than we realize. My grandmother was a saint in my eyes, but she was also a woman who had suffered. And I'm grateful that I got to uncover her story before it was lost forever. Our next story is about a man who discovered that his best friend wasn't who he thought he was. And the revelation came after 20 years of friendship. Story 4. My best friend's double life I. I known Mark for 23 years. We met in Middlewool. We were both awkward, both into video games, both didn't really fit in with the popular crowd. We became bet friends, and we stayed debt friends through high school, through college, through the whole adult life thing. Mark was the bet man at my wedding. I was the godfather to his daughter. We talk almost every day. I knew everything about him, or so I thought. Mark was a consultant. He had for a big firm, traveled sometimes, made decent money. He was married to Jennifer for 15 years. They had 2 kids. From the outside, Mark had a pretty ideal life, but he was always stressed. He was always talking about how tired he was, how much pressure he was under at work, how he felt like he was barely keeping his head above water. About 2 years ago, Mark told me that he was going to a 3-day conference out of state. I didn't think anything of it. He went to conferences all the time. But when he got back, something was different about him. He was lighter somehow, happier. He had this energy that I hadn't seen from him in years. I asked him about the conference. He gave me vague dates and changed the subject. I didn't press. We do that sometimes, you know? You don't always dig into every detail of your friend's life. But then it happened again, another conference, another 3-day trip. And when he came back, he was glowing. I finally asked him directly. I said, Mark, what's really going on? You seem so happy all of a sudden. Are you and Jennifer doing better? Because part of me had always known that his marriage was struggling. Mark never said anything directly, but I could read between the lines. And there was distance between them that hadn't always been that. Mark was quiet for a long time, and then he told me that he couldn't talk about it. He said it was complicated and he didn't want to get me involved. But he assured me that everything was fine, that nothing was wrong, that I didn't need to worry about him. I did worry, I'm not going to lie. I spent weeks worried about Mark. I was trying to piece together what was happening. Was he having an affair? Was he sick and hiding it from everyone? Was he involved in something illegal? I was spiraling. Then one day, completely by accident, I found out the truth. I was at the grocery store and I ran into Jennifer, Mark's wife. She looked exhausted and unhappy, and when she saw me, she seemed surprised. She asked me if I had talked to Mark recently. I said yes, I had. She asked if Mark had meant anything about his work situation. I said no, he hadn't. And then Jennifer did something I didn't expect. She started to cry. She told me that she had discovered Mark's secret. She found hotel receipts and airline tickets. She found text messages on his old phone. She discovered that Mark had been lying to her for 2 years, but not about having an affair, about who he was. Mark had been going to a retreat for people who were struggling with their gender identity. The conferences, the trips out of state, they were retreats where Mark was exploring his identity as a woman. Mark was transitioning. And Mark had been hiding this from everyone, including his wife, because he was terrified. Terrified of losing his marriage, terrified of losing his job, terrified of what everyone would think of him. I don't even know how to explain the emotions I felt when Jennifer told me this. I felt shocked, I felt sad, I felt confused, but mostly I felt sad for Mark. My friend of 23 years had been carrying this enormous secret, and it had been eating him up inside. I confronted Mark about it. I called him and told him that I knew, and I wanted to hear it from him directly. Mark was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. And then he said, "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I should have been honest with you." I told him that I didn't care about that right now. I wanted to know how he was. I wanted to know if he was okay. And Mark tried to cry. He told me everything. He told me that for years he had been struggling with gender dysphoria, this deep, persistent feeling that he was trapped in the wrong body. He had spent decades trying to ignore it, trying to be the man that everyone expected him to be. He had married Jennifer, hoping that having a wife and kids and a normal life would make the feelings go away. But they didn't go away. They just got louder. By the time he was in his 50s, the dysphoria had become almost unbearable. He couldn't ignore it anymore. So he started going to the retreats, these private spaces where he could explore his gender identity without judgment. He had started taking hormones. He was beginning to think about transitioning, but he was absolutely terrified of what it would be for his marriage, his career, his relationship with his kids. What struck me most was hearing the relief in Mark's voice as it told me he had been carrying this secret for so long, and finally being able to say it out loud to someone he loved and trusted was like a weight had been lifted. I told Mark that I loved him, that I would support him, that my friendship wasn't going to change just because he was exploring his identity. I told him that I was sorry he had felt like he had to hide this from me, and I meant it. But here's where things got complicated. Mark told Jennifer, he told his kids, he told his parents, and things fell apart. His marriage fell apart, his relationship with his kids became strained, his parents didn't understand, his job became difficult. There was so much prejudice and fear and anger from the people in his life who couldn't accept who he was. But Mark is still my best friend. I watched him go through this transformation. He's happier here, even though everything in his external life has fallen apart. He's more at peace with himself than I have ever seen him. And I learned that sometimes loving someone means accepting them even when that truth isn't what you expected it to be. What Mark taught me is that everyone is fighting a battle that we can't see. My ex-friend was struggling with something so fundamental to his identity, and I had no idea. I thought I knew him completely, and I was missing a huge part of his soul. That soul is over. And it's a reminder that the people we think we know well can still have secrets we never expected. But it's also a reminder that love means acceptance, even when acceptance is difficult. Our next story is about a woman who discovered that her entire childhood was a lie. And the truth came from a DNA test. Story 5. The DNA test that changed everything. I always thought I knew where I came from. My parents were married. They had me and my brother. We grew up in the same town, went to the same church, and maintained relationships with my extended family. Everything seemed straightforward and normal. My mother was a nurse. My father was an engineer. They had been married for 48 years when my mother passed away. After my mother died, my father seemed lost. He struggled with grief and isolation. My brother and I did everything we could to support him, but we both lived out of state, so we couldn't be there as much as we would have liked. My father started getting into different hobbies to keep himself occupied. One of those hobbies was genealogy. He bought one of those DNA ancestry kits because he wanted to trace our family history back further. He submitted his sample, got his results, and he called me one afternoon with something in his voice that I had never heard before. He called it his confused voice. He said, "I need you to come home. I need to talk to you and your brother about something, and I don't think I can do it over the phone." My brother and I knew something was wrong. Our father isn't the kind of person to be dramatic or to make a big deal out of things. If he wanted us to come Mo, it had to be serious. So we arranged time off work, and we flew Ho to see him. When we got to his house, he was set at his kitchen table with his laptop open in front of him. He looked older than he had when we'd last seen him, like this secret had been aging him. He asked us to sit down, and then he told us that he had submitted his DNA to an ancestry service, and the results had come back with a lot of matches, cousins, and relatives that he didn't recognize. But the thing was, they were all on our mother's side of the family, not his side. The DNA test indicated that our mother might not have been biologically related to us, or rather, my brother and I might not have been biologically related to our father. I remember the room spinning a little bit when he said that. My brother was completely silent. Our father was crying, which was shocking because I had never seen him cry before. He said, "I don't understand. Your mother and I were married. We had you both. How is this possible?" I asked him if our mother had said anything to him about this, and he said that she hadn't. She had taken this secret with her when she died, and now he was left trying to piece together a mystery that our mother had kept hidden her entire life. We decided to contact one of the DNA matches, a woman named Susan who had also taken a DNA test. She turned out to be a cousin on our mother's side of the family, and she agreed to talk to us about what this might mean. Susan told us something that changed everything. She said that our maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, had a child before she was married. She had a daughter when she was very young, just a teenager. The girl was given up for adoption. Susan's family had known about this secret for decades, but it was never discussed openly. And then Susan said something else. She said that based on the DNA matches, it was possible that my brother and I were the biological children of our mother and another man, not our father. Our father felt like the ground had been pulled out of under him. He had spent his entire marriage thinking that my brother and I were his biological children. He had spent decades building a relationship with us based on that assumption, and that he was being told that maybe that wasn't true. We did another DNA test. This time, we included our brother. The results came back, and they confirmed it. My brother and I were not biologically related to the man who had raised us as our father. Our father was devastated. He felt like his entire life had been a lie. He felt betrayed by our mother for not telling him the truth. He felt like his relationship with us was called into question. He kept asking questions like, does this change our relationship? Am I still your father? Do you still love me? And I had to keep telling him over and over again that yes, he is still our father. Because the man who raises you, who teaches you right from wrong, who shows up for you in the hard times, that's your father. Biology, doesn't have anything to do with it. We tried to investigate further. We reached out to our mother's medical records. We looked through old photographs. We were trying to find out who the biological father might have been. And through some detective work, we discovered that our mother had had a relationship with a man named Robert before she married our father. The relationship had ended badly. He had moved away. And apparently, she had become pregnant, but had never told our father. We eventually found Robert. He was retired, living in another state. He was shocked when we reached out to him. He told us that they had no idea our mother had been pregnant. He said that by the time they could have had that conversation, she had already moved on and married someone else. We have a choice there. We could try to build a relationship with Robert.
We could treat him like our father, or at least like something that approximates a father, Robert. But we decided not to, because our father, the man who raised us, who loved us, who showed up every single day of our lives, he's our father. And nothing, not even biology, can change that. What this whole experience taught me is that family is not defined by genetics. Family is defined by love and commitment and showing up. Our father chose to be our father, and that choice matters more than any DNA result. That stow is over. And it's a testament to the fact that sometimes the secrets we keep we're protecting people from end up causing more harm than the truth would have. Our mother spent decades keeping this secret, and when it came out, it caused pain and confusion. But it didn't change the fundamental love that was in our family. Let me take a moment here to acknowledge something. We've been going through some pretty heavy stories tonight. Some of you might be feeling emotionally wrung out. That's completely normal. These are the kinds of stories that get under your skin because they're about the deepest kind of betrayal, the betrayal of family, of identity, of the truth we think we know. But I want you to know that set with these feelings is okay. Sometimes we need to feel things in order to process them. And sometimes hearing other people's stories helps us realize that we're not alone in whatever we're going through. Someone out there has experienced something similar. Someone out there has felt the way you're feeling. So take a breath, adjust your position, make sure you're comfortable, and let's move into our next story. This one is a little bit different. It's still dramatic, it's still intense, but it's also about resilience and survival. Story 6, The Secret, in the garage. I was 14 when I discovered my uncle's secret. My uncle lived 2 doors down from us. He was my father's younger brother, and he was always the fun uncle, the one who took us to baseball games, who let us stay up late watching movies, who didn't have kids of his own, so he treated my siblings and me like we were his kids. My Uncle Dave lived alone in a small house that he'd bought about 10 years before. He was divorced, working as a mechanic, and from the outside, his life seemed pretty normal and pretty quiet. My parents occasionally expressed concern that he seemed lonely, but he assured them that he was fine. He said he liked the solitude. One afternoon, I was riding my bike home from school, and I decided to stop by my uncle's house because he had meant something about helping me fix my skateboard. When I got to his house, I noticed that the garage door was open. I could see into the garage, and what I saw confused me. There was someone in the garage. It was dark inside, but I could make out a bod sitting on a stool. It looked like a person, but something about the way they were seated, something about their posture seemed off. I walked into the garage slowly, and I realized what I was looking at. There was a teenage girl sitting on a stool in the corner of the garage. She was pale, thin, and she looked terrified to see me. I don't think I've ever been more confused in my life. I asked her who she was. She didn't answer. I asked my uncle where she had come from, and my uncle appeared behind me, and he said something that I did not understand. He said, "This is my daughter. Her name is Sarah, and you can't tell anyone about her." I was completely shocked. My uncle had a daughter that nobody knew about, a daughter who was apparently living in his garage.
My uncle took me into the house and he explained the situation. He said that Sarah's mother was his ex-wife, the woman he'd been married to before he divorced. Sarah's mother had been abusive to Sarah, had been neglectful and cruel. Social service had gotten involved and removed Sarah from her mother's custody. Sarah had been placed in foster care. My uncle said that he had filed for custody of Sarah, but the courts were moving slowly. In the meantime, he said, Sarah's mother had contact, and every time Sarah would come back of a visit with her, she would be traumatized and hurt. So my uncle decided that instead of putting Sarah through the foster care system, instead of letting her be hurt by her mother, he was going to take her. He was going to hide her. He was going to keep her safe, even if it meant breaking the law. Sarah had been living in my uncle's garage for 8 months. I didn't know what to do with this information. I was 14 years old. I was horrified. I was confused. And I was loyal to my uncle, so a part of me also understood why he had done this. Sarah looked like she had been through something terrible. She looked like someone who needed protecting. But I also knew that this was wrong. What my uncle was doing was illegal. He was hiding a minor from the authorities. He was depriving Sarah of medical care, of education, of a normal life. He was also destroying his own life by risking criminal charges, by risking prison time. I went away and I didn't tell anyone. I kept my uncle's secret for almost 2 months. I was tortured by it. I would lie awake at night, think about Sarah set in the garage. I would wonder if she was cold. I would wonder if she was hungry. I would wonder if she was okay. Finally, I couldn't carry the secret anymore. I told my parents. And my parents had to take a choice. They could protect my uncle by keeping the secret, or they could do the right thing, which was to report him to the authorities. My parents reported him. The police came and found Sarah. Sarah was taken back into the foster care system. My uncle was arrested and charged with kidnapping and child endangerment. Our family fell apart. The trial was long and complicated. My uncle's lawyer argued that he had been acting in Sarah's vet interest, that he had been trying to protect her. The prosecution argued that what he had done was illegal and dangerous, that he had deprived a minor of her right to proper care and education. In the end, my uncle pleaded guilty to lesser charges and earned 3 years in prison. He also lost all custody and visitation rights to Sarah. But here's the thing that nobody expected to happen. While my uncle was in prison, Sarah, who by that time was 16, reached out to him. She wrote him letters. She told him that even though what he had done was wrong, she understood that he had been trying to help her. She told him that she no longer held it against him. She told him that she forgave him. When my uncle got out of prison, Sarah was 18, and she contacted him directly. They developed a relationship, carefully and slowly, with the understanding that what had happened was wrong, but that their relationship was still valid. Sarah went to college. My uncle helped her pay for it. They talk every week, years later. My uncle never tried to hide Sarah again. He never broke the law again, but he also never forgot the daughter who meant so much to him. And Sarah, who had suffered so much at her mother's hands, was able to find safety with the person who loved her most, even if the path to that relationship was complicated and painful. What I learned from this experience is that sometimes the right thing to do and the thing your heart wants you to do are not the same thing.
I love my uncle, but I did the right thing by reporting him. And in the end, everything got out better because I did. That toe is over.
And what it reminds us of is that sometimes the people who break the law do it for reasons we can understand, even if we can't condone their actions. And sometimes the people we love most make mistakes that force us to choose between loyalty and doing what's right. And usually doing what's right is the harder path, but it's the path that leads somewhere better in the end.
Let's take another moment here. We've been going through a lot together tonight.
These stories are intense. These are the kinds of stories that stick with you. They change the way you see the world a little bit. I want to pause and say thank you again. Thank you for sticking with me through these stories. Thank you for trusting me to take you on this emotional journey.
Thank you for being here. Whether you're listening to relax before bed, whether you're studying, whether you're just escaping your own reality for a while, I see you. I appreciate you. And I'm grateful for every single moment we spend together. Our next story is about a man who discovered that his entire career was built on a lie. And the lie came from his father. Story 7, The Forged Credentials. My father was a businessman. He was successful, respected, and he was everything I wanted to be when I grew up. He went in finance, had a corner office in a downtown building, made what seemed like a fortune. He was confident, articulate, and he always seemed to know what to say in any situation. My father had a degree from an Ivy League school. At least, that's what he always told me. He had a diploma on his office wall. He had a class ring. He had stories about his college days, about his fraternity, about professors who had influenced him. It all seemed real. When I graduated from high school, my father sat me down and told me that I should apply to the same Ivy League school he had gone to. He said it was a great educate, that it would open doors for me, that it would set me up for success just like it had for him. I applied. I was rejected. I was devastated. But my father said it was fine. He said that I could go to a different school, that I could still be successful, but that it would take more effort on my part. He said that without his degree, I would have to work twice as hard to get the same recognition. So I did. I went to a state school. I had hard. I got good grades. I moved to a big city and started my career in finance, following in my father's footsteps. For 10 years, I got in the same industry my father got in. I was doing well, moving up the ranks, making good money. And then I met someone at a conference who knew my father. This person said, "Oh, you're the son of my father's nay? That's incredible. Your father was a legend in our field." I said, "Thank you. Yeah, my father went to Ivy League school, so I always wanted to follow in his footsteps." The person looked confused. They said, "No, your father didn't go to Ivy League school. He went to state school slaying." I was shocked. I said, "That's not right. My father has a diploma of Ivy League school slaying." This person said, "I don't know where you got that information, but I went to Ivy League school with your father's father." I remember him talking about how his son didn't want to go to college at all. He was forced to go to state school slaying. I was confused and disturbed. I confronted my father about this. I asked him right if he had actually gone to Ivy League school, and my father, after some hesitation, admitted the truth. He had not gone to Ivy League school. He had gone to state school just like I had. But when he was starting his career in the 1980s, he realized that having an Ivy League degree opened doors. People took you more seriously. People assumed you were smarter. So he had gotten a diploma made, a fake diploma. He had created a fake credential and added it to his office wall. For near 40 years, my father had been living a lie, and he had pushed me into a position of inadequacy because of that lie. He had made me feel like I needed to work twice as hard because I didn't have the degree he came to have. He had made me feel like I was less than, when in reality, we had the exact same educational background. I was furious. I was heartbroken. I was betrayed. And I was also deeply confused about what to do with this information. My father said that he had done it to provide for his family, to make sure he could give us a good life, to make sure he was respected in his field. He said that the diploma was just a symbol, that what really mattered was his work and his competence. He said that the diploma didn't define who he was. I asked him if he had ever been caught, if anyone at his workplace had ever discovered the truth. He said no. Nobody had ever found out. He said that after he'd been in his job for a few years, the diploma was just background information. Nobody really verified it. He just never meant it again. I had to make a decision.
Right, I could report my father to his employer. I could expose him. I could watch his entire career crumble. Or I could keep his secret. I kept his secret. I didn't tell anyone.
But I also stopped talking to my father for near 2 years. I was too angry, too hurt, too betrayed to maintain a relationship with him. Eventually, we reconciled. My father apologized. He said that he had been aid his whole life that someone would discover the truth. He said that the lie had been eating him up inside. He said that he was sorry for passing on his insecurity to me, for making me feel like I wasn't good enough, for pushing me to go to an Ivy League school when I didn't need to. What was interesting is that after my father retired and no longer needed the lie, he seemed like a different person. He was lighter, he was happier, he seemed like he had finally let go of something that had been weighing him down his whole life. But here's the thing that I still struggle with. My father's freshest success was real. His work was real. His intelligence was real. The credential that got him the first job might have been fake, but after that, he built a legitimate career on his own merits. So does the fake diploma negate everything else he's accomplished? Or is it a small piece of a much larger ish?
Right.
I don't have an answer to that question. But I know that I learned something of my father's story. I learned that we are our own worst enemies. We create lies to protect ourselves, but those lies end up hurting us more than any external threat ever could have. That stir is over, and what it teaches us is that the things we hide have a way of shaping everything else in our lives. My father's fake diploma shaped decades of his life, and it also shaped my childhood and my choices in ways I didn't even realize until much later. We were approaching the end of our time together tonight. I want to bring you a final story before we wrap up. This one is different than the others. It's not just about secrets and betrayal. It's about redemption and healing. Story 8, The Last Apology. My mother and my grandmother didn't speak for 23 years. I don't know the exact dates of what happened between them. I was too young to understand it when it started. But I know that there was a fight, a serious one. And after that, my mother and my grandmother pretended that the other didn't exist. We lived in a different city than my grandmother. My siblings and I grew up without knowing our grandmother. We had aunts and uncles, but our grandmother was just this absent four in our family story. I remember asking my mother once why we didn't see Grandma. My mother said, "Some people are toxic. Sometimes it's better to keep your distance." I accepted that explanation. I didn't question it. I didn't press for deets. I just accepted that my grandmother was someone my mother didn't want to be around. Years passed, my siblings and I grew up, we had our own lives. And then, one day, my mother got a call. It was for the hospital. My grandmother had suffered a massive stroke. She was in critical condition. She might not survive. My mother had to make a decision. She could continue to refuse to see her mother, or she could put aside the anger and the hurt and the distance of 23 years and go to the hospital. My mother went to the hospital. My grandmother survived the stroke, but she was paralyzed on one side of her body. She was in the hospital for months, and during those months, my mother sat by her bedside. My mother helped her with physical therapy. My mother read to her. My mother talked to her. And one day, my grandmother said something to my mother. She said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." My mother asked her what she was sorry for, and my grandmother explained what had happened all those years ago. She explained the fight that had led to the 23-year silence. She explained her perspective on what had gone wrong, and she asked my mother for forgiveness. My mother forgave her. She said, "Mom, I forgave you a long time. Oh, I was just too afraid to let you back in." My grandmother cried. My mother cried. And they spent the last years of my grandmother's life trying to make up for the lost time. We got to know our grandmother. We heard stories about her life, her experiences, her regrets. We got to understand her as a person and not just as a word of shame or anger in our family narrative. When my grandmother died, my mother was at peace with her passing. She didn't have regrets about not having said goodbye or not having made amends. She had been given a second chance and she had taken it. What my mother's story taught me is that time doesn't heal all wounds, but communication can. Forgiveness can. Showing up for the people we love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, can change everything. My mother spent 23 years angry at her mother, and in the end, all that anger was worth letting go of. All that resentment was not worth holding on to, and the peace that came from reconciliation was worth the vulnerability of reaching out. That store is over. And it brings us to the end of our time together tonight. I want to take a moment to thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me to take you through these stories. Thank you for sitting with me through the darkness, through the secrets, through the lies and betrayals and complications that make up so fuss of the human experience. What I hope you take away for tonight is this. Life is complicated. People are complicated. The people we love most are often the ones who hurt us most, not because they want to, but because they're carrying their own pain, their own secrets, their own struggles that we can't always see for the outside. But there's also beauty in that complexity. There's depth. There's the possibility for growth and healing and reconciliation. There's the possibility that the people who disappoint us can surprise us. There's the possibility that we can surprise ourselves.
As you wind down for the night, as you're trying to fall asleep, I want you to hold on to something. I want you to hold on to the fact that you're not alone. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever secrets you're carrying, whatever complicated relationships you're navigating, other people are struggling with the they thing. Other people are carrying similar weight, and it's okay to feel heavy sometimes. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry or disappointed or betrayed. Those feelings are valid. Those feelings are human, but it's also okay to let those feelings go when you're ready. It's okay to forgive. It's okay to move forward. It's okay to build new relationships and new stories on top of the old ones.
Thank you for letting me be part of your Dora. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your attention. I'll be back with more stories soon. But for now, I hope you find peace. I hope you find comfort. I hope you find rest. Sleep well, everyone. You deserve it.